right, everyone, welcome to the Beauty Revealed podcast. I am your host, Candace Claiborne, and you are listening to a podcast that is all about supporting and revealing your inner beauty. And so today I'm really excited because I have a special guest with me. Her name is Erin Moran, and she is going to be sharing with us about the beauty revealed in the heart. The heart is something that we all absolutely need, as well as something that we feel, that we sense, that we go through. And so Erin's going to share her personal story as it pertains to the heart, as well as ways that we can really support all of you with regards to your emotional stance in your heart, as well as your physical and biological space. And so, Erin, welcome to today's podcast. I'm so excited to have you. Why don't you start off by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you so much for having me on your show today. I've been so excited about chatting with you. I know when we had the opportunity to chat ahead of time, it felt like we could just go for hours and hours. So hopefully we'll be able to keep this succinct in our chat today. But I am excited to share my story with the audience. Again, my name is Erin Moran. I have a very windy journey to the place where I am now. When you think about career and development, I'm definitely quite a long ways from where I started off. Currently, I lead a campaign called Go Red for Women for the American Heart Association. We advocate specifically on behalf of women's hearts in their minds, because we also are the American Stroke Association. And the way I got here is definitely a big piece of my story that I'm looking forward to sharing with you. Not a happy piece of my story, but it is my purpose and my passion at this point. I hail from a very different background of how I got here today. I have been 17 years in advertising and marketing, so definitely not the space that I currently live in today. But I also happen to be a sex therapist, which is just kind of crazy. I have a lot of slashes in my role, which what we were talking about right before we hopped on is I'm also in the process of selling a house. So I do real estate on the side as well. Why can't we do it all? Right? I think that's something you probably chat about on your show. In addition to that is the fact that we can just do and be whoever we want.
Yes, absolutely. So, of course, being multi-hyphenate and being able to do many things is definitely the norm for most of us, and I think that that's another discussion. So, today I really would love for you to to start out by sharing with us your very near and dear precious story about your sweet sister Ashley. And for those of you guys who may be sensitive to grief or loss in this time or in this season of your life, I definitely want to give you a heads up that this story is one that is about grief and loss, but is also very touching and a great reminder for each and every one of us that are still on this side. And so, why don't you share her story with us to just give our listeners and our viewers a better understanding of why you got into your work regarding Go Women and the Heart Association.
So my sister is my human. I always think you have a person that you're destined to walk alongside in your journey, in this journey, whatever that looks like for you. And she was born 2 years and 1 day after me. So my birthday is November 8th, hers is November 9th. And we celebrated all of our birthdays together. In March of 2020, I had just recently sold my home and moved to Texas, actually, in that September prior. I was really seeking and craving a space where I was able to go be around Black excellence, to be honest with you. Where we live in this state, it is kind of few and far between that we're able to interact with executives, professionals, folks that are doing big things in just local Arizona. Unfortunately, that's something we're really trying to change and working towards. But I had decided to go there, and I'm going to tell you, I was living my absolute best life for sure. In a high rise with all glass on the 14th floor with a concierge. That's where I felt like I was living my Sex and the City life at that point in time. I had came home to visit my sister on March 7th just to surprise her. And I When I got here, she was kind of not feeling amazing, but she was always one to rally. She had told me in the week prior that she was having rapid heart rate, that she, as a mother of two, was always kind of taking care of her little one. She had a 3.5-year old and a 17-year-old at the time. And she just knew something wasn't right. She knew something did not feel right. She, in her words, said she was feeling generally unwell. And so on that Monday before I arrived, she had went to urgent care. Again, felt like her heart was racing. They told her she was young, she was healthy. If it got worse, follow up with her the emergency room. So 2 days later on that Wednesday, she went to the emergency room. She said, something is wrong. I know something's wrong. My heart is racing. I feel not right. Please do some tests. Well, they did minimal tests, if any, and told her she was young, she was healthy, and she was likely having a panic attack. If it got worse, follow up with her cardiologist. She then did that on the Friday, and her cardiologist told her she's young, she's healthy, she's having a panic attack, and go home and take a nice bath, was his exact words to her. So when I had got here for the weekend, she said, I really don't feel good, but you're here. You surprised me. Let's go dancing. So she did muster up the energy to go dancing because that was our thing. We definitely were let the rhythm move us, we would say. And but she wasn't right, and I knew she wasn't right because we slept in the same bed together for definitely all of our younger lives for sure, and we were. When we got home that night, she got out of bed and went into the next room because she couldn't really breathe. She couldn't breathe laying down. So she said she didn't want to keep me up because she couldn't breathe and it was loud. And at which point I said, please, let's just go to the emergency room. Like, please, that's not normal. If it's that bad, let's go. And she said, I've went 3 times this week. I'm not going to go so they can dismiss me again. Like, it's fine. They're going to run tests in a couple weeks. And I had to leave and fly back to Texas that Sunday night. And on Monday morning at 9 a.m., I got the phone call from my mother that my sister was having a massive stroke at that point in time. And I got to hear on the phone her cries to my mom to please take care of her babies. She knew that whatever was happening was going to be devastating. And she went into heart failure immediately, and she was trying her hardest to make it. I flew back immediately, and that would be the last time I'd fly from Texas because she was in for the battle of her life. I sat by her side by myself in the ICU because that was COVID. COVID was starting at that time. It was the very beginning of that, and held her hand when her heart stopped 8 times. Only to let go just so they could shock it back and start. And she battled through that, and she would make it 3 full months before she passed away in June of 2020. And watching that, seeing that, watching the care she didn't get while I was by her side, I knew and felt how wrong that it was that she wasn't there, that she should still be here. She did all the right things. She went to the doctor. She tried to get the help. She tried to advocate for herself. And then just looking at her 3.5-year-old daughter trying to explain why mommy's not coming home and how she's never going to come home. Something that the conversation you never, ever, ever, ever want to have. So at that point, for me, it wasn't a question of would I stay. I had to stay. Those babies were my babies. That's kind of how I always thought about both of her daughters. We co-parented for a long time. And so I needed to figure out what was next. The world was shut down, right? So to have that level of grieving, to have that level of trauma in a time where you cannot connect with other humans is just something you really can't explain to someone who hasn't maybe gone through it, because that time during COVID, right? You can't even fathom. No one could have said what this was like. And I knew across the world, people were having experiences like this, right? And also thinking, Was she not able to fight the way she was because she had no people around her, because she was stuck in that hospital by herself with people with masks? For it to lose your person, um, knowing they were surrounded by only people with masks and no one that loved them, and knowing that it's the nightmare. It's that replay of the thing that says this is the worst case scenario for someone you love. I just needed to figure out how to honor her, how to try and make it so that little girls weren't having to grow up without their moms, that you didn't have to answer those questions about why they weren't here, because she should be here. I mean, there's not one reason why what happened to her was not preventable. And so I just kind of started volunteering with the Heart Association. They reached out to me. My sister worked for the Phoenix Business Journal, so she was very well connected with a lot of C-suite executives, and a lot of people knew her. They brought her story to the Heart Association. And so just doing volunteering through them, telling her story, I realized this is what I need to do. This is my purpose. This is my calling. This is the way that I can maybe have the right person hear her story at the right time and makes the decision to say, you know what, I don't care if 4 people have told me no. I'm going to go get the 5th no. I'm going to go get the 6th. I'm going to keep pushing until I get answers that feel satisfying to me, because guess what? It's truly your life. There is no other way to put it. This is your life on the line. And doesn't matter who you think is empowered, i.e. the doctors, they're humans. They're flawed. I'm not saying they're all bad or they're all good, but the reality is our health is our own priority. It has to be. It's in your hands.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, Erin. Um, it's amazing to me that all of those things took place. Like you said, you can do all the right things. You can go to the ER, you can go to the urgent care, and yet, like, I am just, it angers me. What, now knowing what you know, and having been through this traumatic and horrific circumstance with your sister, and I love that you call her your like sister soulmate, because I have 3 sisters, and there's a very special connection that you can have with sisters. What would you say to our other non biological sisters out there who are listening and watching, the steps that we can take or things to pay attention to, I would say, um, when it comes to our wellness and our heart health? And are there things that we can say when we get to a doctor, when we get to an ER? Are there specific things that we should be describing or asking for? For example, you talked about they ran tests, but it was minimal. Some people don't even know, like, okay, what's an EKG versus another type of test? Just what are the things that we can maybe say or do that might help us um, in the long run here?
Yeah. So when you think about the kind of language that you can use when you're speaking to doctors, it's actually very, very, very important, especially if you're in an emergency situation. So if you're having chest pains, if you're feeling like that's one of your primary symptoms, if you're having a combination of symptoms, though that might look like a pain in your back for women, a pain in your jaw, if you're feeling nauseous, if you have just a general, again, feeling of unwellness, it's the combination that you should really be paying attention to, right? You're not going to just say, oh, my stomach's a little upset. That's not going to be the main symptom. But if you're having a combination of those things, then you should walk into that ER and say the words, I think I'm having a heart attack, specifically. They are going to prioritize you. They need to move you through in a different speed of what they would if you just said, I'm having some chest pains, or maybe I feel like I have indigestion. Then they're not going to move you through the system as quickly as they would if you say those exact words, I think I'm having a heart attack. Similar to stroke, it's so important to know the signs and symptoms of stroke. And so the best acronym to remember is FAST. So it is facial drooping, arm numbness, weakness, slurred speech, time to call 911. Really, if you're noticing a combination of those things, if you look and you ever see someone that you're interacting with, someone like that, and you notice that their face is drooping on one side, or it seems like they have extreme weakness, then you need to be calling 911 for them and telling them, hey, I think you could be having a stroke. Because with stroke, time is tissue. Truly, the more seconds that you waste, that is your brain tissue that does not regenerate. So once your brain tissue is dead, it's dead. Now, the brain is very what we call neuroplastic, neuroplasticity, where it's able to develop new pathways and make new connections where you can kind of work around what the previous ones were, which is one thing that's incredible about the human brain. But you still need to get to and treat it really quickly. So same when you go to the emergency room, it looks like, I think I'm having a stroke with those two key symptoms. Outside of that, if you go and you know something's wrong, let's just say it's more of a general thing. One thing that I encourage women to say very specifically, let's just say that you went there, you do have chest pains, but you're just, I don't know, I feel funny. And they go in and they say, hey, it's really likely anxiety. What's going on right now? Are you stressed out? You seem like you're really hyper. And then you're going to say, okay, that could be possible. But what is the differential diagnosis? So those words, differential diagnosis, that tells them, okay, well, it truly could be anxiety. That's very possible, right? But I need you to tell me, what are all the other things that these symptoms could be? And that's what your differential diagnosis is. And once they say, well, it could be a heart attack, it could be indigestion, you could have this, you could have that, then your next follow-up question is, and what have you done to rule those things out? I need you to do diagnostics before I'm not actually leaving until we're certain that that is not those things. Something that's truly emergent. When you say EKG, I know you asked that question, that's just an echocardiogram where they're basically going to just look and see what is the rhythm of your heart, right? What is the heart rate beating in? Now, that is going to be indicative of some things, but it doesn't always catch everything because it's a 30-second snippet in time. So if you don't catch arrhythmias that are happening, if there's not a specific presentation in that 30 seconds, then it's as if it didn't ever happen. And so it's really not the best. It's a great point in time catch, but if they're not continuously monitoring you, how are you going to know if that's the only test that they ran? So, asking for something like a chest CT or further diagnostics that truly can rule out, inclusive of blood work, truly rule out the worst of things that could happen. You think of blood tests that look at something called a troponin level, and that's trying to say, is there actual a certain protein being released when your heart muscle is damaged itself? So that's a test that they certainly should be running, as well as something called a D-dimer, especially in people who are prone to clotting, because that's going to detect if there are blood clots forming in your body at some point and somewhere. And that's often what is causing stroke, right? There's an ischemic stroke or a hemorrhagic stroke, meaning one is by blood clots, the first, and the second would be like aneurysm bursting or a hemorrhage that's happening in your actual brain. And so again, the more that we can educate ourselves about these different things, the better language you can speak to the doctors, so that you can actually, one, understanding what they're saying back to you, but two, be able to speak to them in their own language or truly understand what they're saying. The other thing I would highly, highly, highly recommend is myself. I like to consider myself an independent woman. I can do in all the things. Do you need to go with me to the doctor? No, it's fine. I got it. If I feel like I'm going to the emergency room, I will drive myself there. I have definitely done that. That's not helpful, right? I mean, to have an advocate, to have someone who can go alongside you, who can be that extra set of ears, because if you are in a panic state, if you are in that heightened set of emotion, you may not be receiving everything that's coming to you right now. You might forget about the questions you want to ask or those symptoms that you had before and not tying it all together. So I highly recommend even going to doctor's appointments that are about complex issues to bring somebody alongside you so that they can be that extra set of ears and even that voice for you when maybe you forgot the 15 things that you wanted to say when you got there. They call that white coat syndrome as well, right? You see the doctor and it's like, pew, everything goes right out of your mind. So those are a few tips that I would use when you think about one, protecting your head, your heart, those vital organs that are going to keep our bodies moving and keep them moving well.
Those are so good because, I've had an occasion where I needed to get to the ER and I was kind of just like putting it off and just like, okay, I think I'm okay. I was having the chest pains, a lot of the similar symptoms you were talking about. And the friend that I was with immediately was like, no, girl, we are going to the ER now. And she stayed with me and I had an advocate. I had somebody with me on the phone even to just kind of guide me through the process. So I think being able to talk about how you're feeling with a friend, with a family member, to say, hey, I've kind of been feeling this or that, because sometimes we brush things off. And then there are times where we think that something is normal. And until run it by somebody else and they're like, girl, no, that's not normal. you know, they're like, yeah, so I think just remembering to have those people, and sometimes folks don't want to open up and talk about their health and how they're feeling. You feel like you're going to, impose on somebody else, or like, oh, she's got 5 kids. I have 2 friends that have 5 kids. And if I know I need them, you better believe they would be like, you need to call me. Like, I can handle caring for you right now, along with my family. So sometimes people, you think that someone isn't available for you, but reach out and ask and get that support wherever you need it. So,
And that's a common thing, right? We see that women and in all forms in fashion, we feel that we don't want to burden other people with our problems. You're more likely to say, oh, well, I didn't want to call 911 because it was late, or I didn't want to wake my husband up because, he was sleeping. I know he had a meeting. I didn't want to burden someone else. And I hear that in my role, sitting across from people literally every day, that I didn't want to be a burden to you, though I knew I was something was very wrong. And women will do that. And so we see delayed care, meaning that they don't seek treatment until much later. And unfortunately, if we're delaying our own care, when we get to the hospital, we're more likely to get care later also. So we wait an average of 20 minutes longer in the emergency room than our male counterparts do. So guess what? I just waited an extra hour and a half at home, or a few days. Now I'm going to wait. I'm going to get less care and treatment when I get to the hospital. I am setting myself up truly for failure at that point in time. And, you can't count on other people to care about your own life as much as you should at the end of the day, right? You have to be fighting through that. And you have to realize, if I don't speak up, I might not have opportunity to ever. And that's really kind of the frame that you have to continue to put things into.
yeah, no, absolutely. And even when I'm glad you talked about that, because we're really talking about the emotional side of the heart. The heart is, yes, our most vital organ. It develops very early on, and that heartbeat is something that, as a expectant or new mother, you hear that first heartbeat, or even you're waiting to hear the heartbeat in that first ultrasound appointment. And I definitely reach out to, and my heart goes out to those mothers who have had to experience not hearing that heartbeat, because it's such a precious and sacred moment. And the heartbeat is really something that we need, and it's a part of us, but it also connects to our emotion. It connects to how we feel. It connects to all the things you just talked about, the way we view ourselves and how we may prioritize ourselves or not. And so when it comes to relationships, I know obviously you have a background as a sex therapist, and we talk about the heart being emotional and connective. And so I'd love to hear your perspective and the experience you've had with regards to the heart and the role that it plays when it comes to physical connectivity and relationships and just intimacy in general.
I mean, you can look at that. It's so from so many different levels. I actually am reading a book right now by an author called Dr. Gabor Mate, and it's called The Myth of Normal. And it's looking at the trauma that we experience in life and how that is expressed through illness in your body. Uh, and they are directly correlated. There's not this idea that we continue to perpetuate here in Western medicine that somehow our body operates in silos, right? My stomach is not connected to my heart. My head has nothing to do at all. My mental state, my actual emotions have nothing to do at all with my physical representation, which is just crazy. It really is. I mean, you can't think that one system does not directly affect the other. And so in this book, it actually references so many studies that have been done, so much research that has been conducted that shows that, yes, one does directly affect the other. So there is something in psychology we look at called ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences. Things where maybe kids have had sexual trauma or physical abuse, or they lived in extreme poverty. They lived in conditions where their basic fundamental needs were not met. And that basic fundamental need also looks like love, care, and affection that we have from the time that we come into this world, right? And we know that if you do have a high level of these adverse childhood events, you are an exponentially higher chance of developing heart disease, cancer. All of these different chronic conditions are directly correlated with these events that we experience when we're younger. So to kind of take that even further, you know for a fact that as you get older, the experiences that you're having, if you're living in high stress environments, if you are a person that developed, could be speaking of myself, I don't know, into a hyper independent person as a trauma response, because maybe you didn't have your needs met as a young person, or you did realize that you couldn't count on people the way you thought. So I'm going to do everything by myself. I'm very type A. I am going to check all the boxes. I have all that. I'm always moving. I'm very ambitious. I'm going to do all the things, and I'm not slowing down and stopping. Well, that is a very stressful personality type to even have, right? You're always going, your wheels are always moving. Then you're much more likely to start having manifestations in your body of systems starting to say, hey, guess what? I know you don't think you need to slow down, but I'm going to sit you down. You're going to have to sit down, and that's the thing that we take for granted. And those things play out in our relationships as well, right? I can look at really my past 4 or 5 years of life that have been really, really challenging, in totality of losing my human, trying to navigate the world and see what that looked like, what was going to be my definition of me now that half of myself is gone. And that's really how it felt to me is, Ashley and I explored the world together. We endless trips, adventures, all of the memories, all of my core memories kind of involved her in some way. And how to define that. And I have gone through endless tests to see what happened to my heart, because my heart has not returned to normal. I did get COVID immediately. Within 3 weeks of her having her stroke event. So it was in the very, very beginning. And then all my systems just went array, and they awry, and they never have been back since then. And I happen to know and think and truly believe that, well, maybe when I was holding her hand for every time that her heart stopped, maybe there was an energetic transfer, right, of what she was experiencing, that intense pain, but also the pain that I store now internally, that is stored in my cells from that trauma of going through that, going through. Then I got married and divorced in a year, which is a whole nother story, which we can talk to as well. But also, another thing that is puts your body in this heightened state of, um, you have to address it. You can't not. You have to start with unwinding and unpacking and unloading this trauma that you're carrying, so that you truly can release yourself from from the cellular level that this is stored in you, from having to carry that burden. And how do you kind of move through now, and actively release is the best way that I could kind of say that. So there's so much correlation with your physical and mental health, and there has to be an ongoing process of release. And that's one thing I know you and I have chatted about historically, is what does that release look like? How do you really focus on that? Is it through exercise? For me, that is one thing that's super important. That has always been kind of my therapy. Is I always say I like to really get in the gym and throw the weights around. And that is something my sister used to say when we lived together. It would be a few days and she would be like, "What is wrong with you? Your attitude is hideous." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Oh, you haven't been to the gym for a few days. Please, God, go work out. Please." Because that's just a way for me that she knew, like, okay, you really need to go work out, because whatever's happening is not where it's at. But also the talk therapy. I get, I, most therapists have therapists, I would say. That's kind of one of the things that, you take on a lot. You have to be able to let it go, or else it'll sit with you. And so I'm huge on seeing a therapist whenever I need to. There'll be periods where it's a year that goes by that I'm seeing them on a weekly basis, and then maybe a couple years will go by and you don't need that right now, right? But I think that you need to be able to leverage all those tools as a way to free yourself up, so that you can experience life and in the fullness of life, without this heaviness that can sit with you if you let it do so.
Yeah, I mean, the the heart itself, right? There's a phrase in ancient Egypt in Kemet where they talk about the heart being like the heart mind, and it being directly connected, just as you said. And there's a really important scene called the weighing of the heart, and that scene really kind of depicts what does the heart look like compared to the weight of a feather. And at the point of death, when you kind of like your judgment scene, if you will, is your heart heavier or lighter than a feather? And it's the idea that the heart really establishes a person's character. It is the thing that holds who is this person really. And you talk about ACEs, you talk about the trauma, you talk about, in any kind of relationship, you're having to share those things with a person, or at least they're having to interact with it at some point, whether you're aware of it or not. And that is truly, the heart mind connection. We often talked about the mind being the most important sexual organ, where sometimes people aren't able to connect because their minds are just so full of excess things or traumatic experiences that you can't even really connect with the person that you say you love and that you want to be with so much. Um, so therapy definitely high on my list. I'm excited that we have had more conversations about health and wellness. Yes, there are a lot of buzzwords out there now and things that kind of just, we can overlook it and say like, oh, been there, done that, self-care, been there, done that, therapy. But whatever it is for you that is going to help you to actually begin to release. And I love that you said release, right? Because even when you think about the physical heart itself, the way that the heart is able to function is because blood is coming in and out. It is constantly releasing. It's a valve, and a door is opening and closing every single moment. And so the process of releasing is really key in order to have a healthy physical heart and a healthy emotional heart, and mentally to be able to recognize things, acknowledge what's going on, but releasing it, like letting them go, or else it becomes the very thing that entangles you and hardens your heart.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things that you're saying there in terms of the release and the process, and buzzwords that kind of just made me think a little bit about how people are very kind of into talking about healing right now and what that looks like, and that's great. I am so glad that we're talking about that, the thing that I want to dispel is this idea that healing is a destination, that you are going to be healed one day. And the reality is, no, you're not ever going to just wake up and say, I am good to go. I am 100% corrected. This is where I need to be, because we experience new things all the time. You're taking in information, you're letting it out. You're doing that on a day to day. You're interacting. You're having horrible things happen at work. You're dealing with this coworker that you just want to, you're not really getting through to this person, or your spouse, or your partner, or your child. There's all of those things that parents, right? We get into this age right now. The dynamic is really shifting as you think about that circle of life. There's so many things. And so, there is a place where maybe you've worked on this one area and you feel good, you feel better about it, but it's always there. It's always underlying. There's always kind of this essence that flows directly beneath the surface. That is why we talk about triggers, right? And you working on understanding what your triggers are, because the whole goal is maneuver differently, is to learn a different way to respond and understand and recognize and give grace and honor this thing that's happening, because it's there for a reason. It used to be to protect you, and now it doesn't serve that same purpose, right? So we have to work to continuously readdress, because the people that are closest to us are most likely to be that mirror for ourselves, and they're going to be the most likely ones that are going to cause all those fun pieces and ways of yourself that you hate the most, that probably don't really serve you in any positive way any longer. That's an ongoing, continuous, everlasting journey. And it really should be. It should be something that, all right, well, I've kind of got this one, but all right, well, now there's this thing. Now I need to start working on this thing. And that's the whole idea of growth mindset, right? It's the idea of evolving towards the light, which is where we say enlightenment is, it's a journey towards the light. It's a journey of being awakened and aware and more humble and more compassionate, and all of those things. That is never ending. It is not a destination, right? And that's the piece that keeps popping up for me when I hear people talk about it. And the latest TikTok and Instagram influencer is like, no, this is not a one stop shop, right? We have to keep moving through, essentially.
No, absolutely agree with you 100%. And I love that you mentioned the idea of enlightenment, because even that concept, when it comes to the heart and things that are written about the heart in biblical literature, talks about guarding the heart, for out of it flows the issues of life, or out of the heart, the mouth speaks, the heart being a very sacred place. And the heart will tell on you because you open your mouth, what comes out of your mouth is coming from your heart. And so, we often talk about checking yourself, check your heart, see what's going on in there based on what's coming out of your mouth. And so, just the idea of really being attentive to that, and that enlightenment, that light, that spark, is exactly what we get to live with and do with on this earth. And so, I love that you have shared so much today. And before we leave, I'd love to hear you share a little bit about that character piece, because the heart is really that example of character. And so, how have you, or I should say, what is one kind of character development that you've seen in yourself, even over these past 4 to 5 years, where your heart has really changed towards growth and development? Because when I met you, you had just this high beam energy, reserved, yet almost, and I love that your Instagram name includes lioness. Is it lioness boss babe? Lioness boss babe, because that is like, I love that hedgehog for you. Lioness, boss, babe. Like, it's perfect. And because you exude that sort of energy, um, it comes out really strong. And I know that it didn't happen overnight. And so, what would you say is one part of that character that you've really worked to develop? And how would you encourage other listeners on their journey of just ongoing heart development, really?
Oh, that's such a good question because I feel like there's so many different things that are popping into my mind, really, as I think about my long term growth and change. Um, so I'm going to give you two because giving me one, I can't get to one right now. The one piece is I would say is that I really truly believe that you can be however you want to be. If you're identifying that there is a piece of yourself that you really don't love, and the piece I'll use for myself is, I was really bullied very intensively, really all the way almost into college. And so I felt like I was very guarded. I was definitely introverted. I was not the person by any means that would just walk up to someone and strike up a conversation. They want to come talk to me, cool. But I would never in a million years just feel comfortable going up and talking to someone. And so I was that friend where if someone said, hey, let's go to this party, and I went with my friend and they left me, oh my God, I would lose it. I would be like, how dare you leave me? I didn't know anybody. What did you expect me to do? Well, we're kind of at a party. I would expect for you to go do party things, right? But that's not how I looked at it. And so it was really through my career journey and being in outside sales, that I realized that either I was going to eat or not because I was 100% commission. And so it was kind of like, okay, do you want to make money and actually survive, or do you not? You have to talk to people you don't know. That's going to be a part of this job. And so it really started with that and continuously putting myself in the most uncomfortable possible settings. And I would do that very, it was a concerted effort to go and be in these networking events, go be in this. And I hated it. I remember I would go into like these flop sweats, I swear, where I'd be like, I don't want to lift my arms up. I don't want to, because like I'm sweating so much. I was so nervous. And it took years. I will certainly say that it took years because originally I was kind of more comfortable in a business setting. I could do that. I could go talk to people that I knew for a purpose during these hours. And the second that the clock was, I was back to being the girl that you were not going to leave at a party. Socially, that wasn't going to happen. And then like a little bit more, I would start going to a movie by myself or going to a restaurant. God forbid you sit and eat by yourself as a woman, at a restaurant and not looking at my phone the whole time. And I hated it. And now, these are things I adore, that when I think about my self-care, that really is what it looks like. It really looks like my favorite thing on a Sunday or a Saturday to do is go to the mall and to a restaurant there and have a couple cocktails by myself and then go shopping. Like I love that by myself. And it would have never, ever been because I'm striking up conversations with people sitting at the bar and random things. And I love that. And now when people ask me if I was extrovert or if when I share that I was introverted, people say they could not possibly imagine that being a reality. And so that's one of my powerful testimonies, I really believe, because I feel like if you want to be away, you can work towards being that way. You have to realize that it's not going to be a fun journey and it's not going to be comfortable. And then that's where all the best stuff happens, right? Is in all those most uncomfortable spaces. And then the second one, I'll try to make it shorter, is really since losing my sister, she was my person, right? She was the one who's my ride or die. We're going out dancing. If I'm going out of the country, wherever it's going, she was coming with me. I would buy her plane ticket if she couldn't in the time because she had kids. Like you were coming with me. And so I never really invested a lot of time in female friendships or relationships because I was in a very male dominated space for work. I was really taught that women were your frenemies, right? There was always an angle or an agenda, or they're my competition. And so I wasn't to be close to them. And I didn't care about that. I just didn't, because I had my bestie. That's all I needed, really. And anybody else was coming or going, and that's fine because she'd always be there. And so losing her, what do? Right now, your human's gone. And I had, some friendships at more of a surface level, but not a tribe, not this fierce, powerful group of women that energy is just so beyond different that can uplift you at any time and can remind you of who you are and the lioness that's inside of you and all of those things. And so with my work now, leading Go Red, I get to sit at a table with 16 C-suite executives that are doing incredible things and learn from them and absorb from them. And it got me in the community meeting with other women that like to empower women, which is how we ultimately met, is through that kind of evolution. And so now I spend so much focused time and energy because I'm really a person that believes that, we have a limited amount of it. And so you really need to manifest the intentional with your time. And I do pour into those relationships of these incredible humans that I've met along the way, and cultivating those and making sure that they know they're important to me, and vice versa. And now it has been something that's changed my life completely. And I feel so lucky in the vein that I get to sit around, really just, when I say fill my cup, right? Hearing other women's story, hearing your story and your evolution, having these conversations, realizing that, hey, maybe there's a reason why the powers that be don't want women banded together, because together we do incredible things. And so keep us separated, keep us hating each other, keep us thinking we're all competition all the time. And she's pretty and I want her hair, but I don't like her and she has an attitude. And is that real or fake? Keep us doing all this gossip of things that are not important, because that's going to keep us from running everything. So, yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, I couldn't have said it better. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so much to say. But
Yes.
with the beauty and essence of time, I'm so thankful for the time that we have spent here today, that you have shared with me, with our listeners, with our viewers. You talked about that friendship and that connection. I love to call that here at Beauty Revealed my compliment crew. And so those are the people that compliment you both with word and encouragement, but also compliment you in terms of partnership and connectivity. And so
Yes.
find your compliment crew, find the people that you know you can connect with and talk about the issues of your heart, be it physical and well-being, or even emotional and mental capacity. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. Thank you again, Erin, for coming on today and just being so gracious and sharing your truth and just all of the gems that you shared. I so appreciate you. And
Yes, thank you. I hope we get to do it again.
yes, we will definitely do it again. And for those of you guys watching and listening, be sure to follow me on Instagram at Candace Clay. And of course, you can take a listen to more of our podcast episodes of The Beauty Revealed on all streaming platforms near you. All right, guys, have a great day. And thanks for joining us. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.